Everybody, this is the 5th episode of my video blog series, Let's Write. If you haven't seen the previous ones, I recommend you check them out just to get the background for this one. As I said in the last week's episode, I've been terribly busy with finishing my master's thesis, and I'm glad to tell you that it's finally taking its final form. Small tinkering is still required as always, and it will still be at least a week before I send it to the professor for evaluation. After that, I still have a move from apartment to apartment in the near future, and it will take quite a bit of energy to get it done as well. Still, I'm thinking that I might go back into writing, or in this case editing a fiction by the late April or early May. I have an earlier manuscript done at the version 1, so it will take at least 2 more versions before I'll send it anywhere. As usual, I'm afraid I can't tell you much about the manuscript, but it's a historical novel taking place in the 17th century England, and like all my other manuscripts, it has a supernatural or psychological twist depending on how you read it. Anyway, hopefully the next time I'll be able to tell, I'll be more relieved than usually, and glad to tell you that the thesis is done and waiting a crushing criticism at my professor's desk. Today's topic is theme, and how that should or should not be present in the story. Also, I'm going to make a division here between popular and elitistic novels based on their view of theme versus plot as well. Every story should have some sort of a theme. It doesn't have to be anything too complicated or overly obscure, but some connecting idea from scene to scene other than the plot itself is, in my opinion, mandatory to every decent work of fiction. The plot is basically just the answer to why something happens, and the theme answers what else happens, what else is going on. The plot describes the events, and the theme describes everything else. This is quite difficult to explain in a purely theoretical and non-specific manner, so let's dive into an example. I'm currently reading Salman Rushdie's a bit more than a small bit controversial The Satanic Verses. If you don't know why this book is still nearly 30 years after its release controversial, Google will provide you the answer. I'm not going to dip my toes too deep in this pool of what is right for criticism, what can and cannot be depicted in negative light in a work of fiction, and should Rushdie's book be considered as an insult, and so forth. But instead I'm going to focus on the book's theme. The Satanic Verses, at least for the roughly first half of the book, is not about Islam, nor Satanism, not insulting the Prophet Muhammad, nor anything else you might consider it might be about. No, the Satanic Verses is about immigration. A very personal matter to Rushdie, since he's an Indian, born in India, raised in Britain, and considers himself a Brit, if I'm not too terribly mistaken. And how living in another culture and state changes you. How people in that different culture see you, and how all this affects your way of perceiving yourself and the world around you. This is what the Satanic Verses, at least for the first half, is about. Some of this is in the plot, but mostly the fact that you are not reading firstly blasphemous book, but instead a deeply personal story about the struggle between several cultures and personalities is told in the book's themes, in everything else than the events themselves. If you want to read the Satanic Verses as a book about 2 people who miraculously survived 30,000 feet fall from an exploding airplane by flapping their arms as if they were wings and singing some verses, you can do that. That's just the plot of the book. The theme is there, between the lines, and even though it's not difficult to spot or to find, you have to look at what else is going on than what is actually going on. I don't know if that makes any sense, but to me it makes. Well, anyway, deep shit. I'm terribly sorry if that was confusing as well, but I do have a tendency of being complicated and difficult to understand, and that's what you get for studying philosophy in university as a minor. But yeah. Anyway, Satanic Verses is very much an elitistic novel, since the meaning of the book cannot be figured out by just reading the events, following the plot. What the book is about is something else than what it seems to be about. This is quite different from the popular novels where the story is about what it's about. Some novels have no theme, only the events and the plot themselves. They are extremely easy to just pick up and read and enjoy yourself some high-octane thriller, sci-fi or horror entertainment. For example, mostly in movies, the summer blockbusters are usually like this. They have a very thin theme. For some people that's enough, and it's fine. Enjoy them all you like, I won't take that away from you. But, you know, it's still different. In Finnish literature scene, there is one particular writer, Ilkka Remes, who spouts out 2 novels a year with very poor prose. Just the bare basics of a plot, and a lot of action. And to me, Remes embodies the mindset of a popular fiction to the fullest. The categories of popular and elitistic fiction are, however, always misleading, since popular fiction might have just as much as much as a theme as an elitistic novel, and vice versa. Instead of 2 countries with a huge wall built on the border, if you're American in 2016 AD, it should be quite easy to imagine. Instead, consider a scale from a purely populistic Remes, for example, novels to purely elitistic novels. To, for example, James Joyce's ridiculously avant-garde Finnegan's Wake comes to mind, where most of the novels sit comfortably somewhere between these 2 extremes. Only the most degrading and offensive to good literature are devoid of a theme, just like the most arrogant and offensive to good reading experiences are devoid of a plot. In the example of the Satanic Verses, the story is there, but so is the theme, and a reader will be able to decide which way he or she wants to read the book. Judging solely by its prose, the Satanic Verses is notably more elitistic than popular, in my opinion, but popular, but not still too far from the extreme of Finnegan's Wake, for example. On the other hand, Stephen King's books have a theme, but are leaning more towards the popular end of the scale. Being more like, you know, yeah, and mostly focused on the plot, not the theme. Anyway, my message here is that recognize the story you are writing or reading as a part of this scale. If you don't go totally to either extreme, you can write and read a brilliant novel. Just the same, whether it's popular or elitistic or vice versa, it doesn't matter. Neither is better nor worse per se. But if you expect a thrill ride from Rushdie or Joyce or, for example, Paul Auster, you might be tempted calling the book rubbish. Just like if you're expecting a multifaceted theme and a deep philosophical questions from King or Remes or Dan Simmons, you might be tempted calling the book rubbish, just the same. Know what you are reading and writing. And you can only then can you truly appreciate the work of fiction as it is, rather than what it isn't. That's enough for today, and I hope to see you next time around. Till then, keep writing and keep being creative.